Hello and welcome. India's top diplomat is also an acclaimed author and a true citizen of the world. He's devoted his energies to the United Nations since an early age and knows its workings back to front. This week on One on One, meet one of the leading lights at the UN, Shashi Tharoor. This urbane diplomat is widely recognized for his devotion to the UN over the years. He's also been named a global leader of tomorrow by the World Economic Forum. Born in London, raised in India and living in New York, Shashi Tharoor puts his background to good use on a daily basis by bridging the diverse cultures at the UN. He started his career with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees nearly 3 decades ago, before ending up overseeing the monumental task of handling UN communications. An appropriate task, perhaps, considering Tharoor is an accomplished writer with 9 books to his name so far. He describes his efforts as leaving smudgy fingerprints on the footnotes of the pages of history. Shashi, good to be with you. Now despite your Peter Pan reputation, we catch you at the half century, if I could use a cricket term. Are you happy with what you've achieved so far?
Oh, I don't know. I think happiness is a relative term. If it means complacency, no. I don't think that I've earned the right to rest on any laurels. Do I feel I've wasted the first 5 decades of my space on this planet? No, I think I've done a few things that have meant something to me and more important to other people. So I will say that, yes, broadly speaking, I'm happy, but not happy enough that I'm ready to rest.
So what would you say was your biggest personal achievement and perhaps professional achievement?
Professionally, I think that working for the United Nations at this period of the organization's existence and of human history has been an intensely satisfying and rewarding experience. And I began my career working for refugees at a time when, in fact, the organization I was working for, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, was essentially unknown. Literally. And then soon after I joined it, we had refugee crises erupting around the world. The boat people crisis of the Vietnamese, problems in the Horn of Africa, the Afghan refugees coming out after the Soviet invasion, problems in Latin America with the fall of the Somoza government. And suddenly, UNHCR was involved in the top 5 stories of every BBC World Service newscast. If Al Jazeera had existed, you'd be talking about us too at the time. And it became an extraordinary opportunity for young, dedicated people to play a small part in actually helping determine some of the great human events of our time. That was an extraordinary education experience. Then I left that and came to peacekeeping by coincidence at the end of the Cold War, when again peacekeeping that had been largely moribund, at least stagnant for over a decade at that point, suddenly erupted with a whole flurry of new operations that became possible because of the end of the superpower paralysis in the Security Council and all the possibilities for the world. I myself was involved intensively in the tragic wars in the former Yugoslavia. And again, playing a small part, very, very richly challenging, and therefore one felt that the efforts one is making as a person make a difference to something that really matters.
So personally, what would it be?
Personally, I would think more in terms of individual human stories. I think, for example, of a family I remember in Singapore who left Vietnam in a tiny boat. The boat had, frankly, a cannibalized tractor engine, which conked out. And so this boat was drifting on the high seas without any power. They ran out of food. They ran out of water. They were subsisting on rainwater and hope. And they had 2 small children with them, a baby and a small infant. So the parents slit their fingers to make the children suck the blood in order to survive. When they were rescued, as it happens, by an American ship, this family was literally at the edge of death. My staff were able to get them out there. We rushed them to a hospital where they battled for life. And then to see the same family a few months later, healthy, well-dressed, and ready now for a new life in the United States. That sort of thing gives you a satisfaction at the human personal level that no amounts of reports, documents, General Assembly resolutions can possibly amount to. And my life, I'm privileged to say, has been full of incidents like that.
Now, ironically, though, the UN, in nearly 3 decades that you've been with it, has changed a lot. Even by your own admission, it's really not the organization you started with. So how have you been able to survive if you like, the political change it's gone through?
Well, to begin with, the United Nations has always been an organization that adapted to the real world. If you read the Charter, it was a charter written by the victorious powers of World War II. You'll find provisions in it, for example, obliging every country in the world to sign binding agreements with the UN to provide land, sea and air forces to maintain peace around the world. I mean, those ideas, frankly, reflected a different era. And in any case, they became impossible to implement the moment the Cold War started. So what happened? The UN didn't close down. It immediately adapted to the new realities. It invented peacekeeping, which didn't even get a mention in the Charter, as a flexible response to new realities. Similarly, we who work for the UN, I often say to youngsters whom I address or meet, that you work at the UN, you've got to be both an idealist and a realist. You have to be an idealist because without ideals, you may as well go off and work for a bank or a law firm and make lots of money. This is not a place for that. But if you only have ideals and you're not prepared to pursue them within the framework of the possible, within the framework of what can be realistically achieved, you're also in the wrong place because the UN is an organization of member states and we can only do what governments enable us to, equip us to and support us and finance us to do. So that gives you, if you like, an adaptability to the real world, which has certainly been a feature of the UN's experience and therefore of my own experience as a UN official.
Potentially very, very frustrating, though.
Sometimes frustrating, but you know, there is a certain reward in knowing that what you are actually able to accomplish within those parameters will actually happen. You know, the world is full of idealists and do-gooders, and more power to them. Without them, I think the world wouldn't change. But if they tried to pursue their ideals without the framework of an institution that incorporates governments that can actually implement those ideals, frankly, where would you end up? The story I told you about that family, if it wasn't for the UN, do you think we could have got governments to allow, in this case, the government of Singapore, to allow a ship to dock with refugees on board and allow them to disembark? Would I have been able to persuade governments to take these refugees and give them a new life in another country? These things come because of the clout that the United Nations, as an intergovernmental body, has with governments. And that's part of the strength of what we do.
Beyond your diplomacy and your work as an international diplomat, you're a writer. You're well known as a writer. You keep it up somehow. I don't know how you find the time.
Not sleeping enough.
So let me ask you about that side of your character and where you are. Does that keep you sane? Is that your side career? How do you see that side of your...
Well, it's always been something that has mattered to me. I mean, in a sense, I see myself as a human being with a number of responses to the world, some of which I manifest in my work at the United Nations and some of which I manifest in my writing. I've always felt that without one or the other, a part of my psyche would wither on the vine. And my writing goes back to my childhood days. I started scrawling as a scrawny and asthmatic child, confined to bed in an era before television, computers, Nintendo, whatever. And so I wrote. And fortunately, I had a parent who took me seriously, my father, got things typed up and sent them off. And my first appearance in print was around the age of 10. And that's addictive. It's probably almost as addictive as appearing on television with the frequency you do. So the result was that I kept it up as something I always did in addition to schoolwork or college work or later office work. And as a kid, I must say that to me, it seemed to me the most natural way I could express all the things that I wasn't expressing in my schoolwork and later in my college work. And so today, when I work at the United Nations, it becomes indeed an escape from my official life to spend, even if it's Sunday midnight, thinking of myself as an individual with his own thoughts and ideas and not as an official with a tie on and a job to do.
If you were to write a fictional story about the United Nations, what would the plot be?
It would have to be after I leave, because as long as I'm here, I don't think honestly that I'm capable of the detachment that I think a writer needs for this sort of thing. But equally, I don't think it would be fair to my obligations to this organization. So one day, when the UN is behind me, I'll tell you the plot of a UN novel.
Your early childhood, you were born in London, then went to India, grew up in India till your late teens, and then were educated in London and then later in the US. So quite a mix. Do you see yourself as Eastern or Western?
Oh, I see myself very much as Indian in the sense that, you know, my identity, my mind was shaped by the place I grew up. And I grew up in Bombay, in Calcutta, and in Delhi, school, high school, and college. And I'm ethnically from the south of India. So I grew up very much with a pan-Indian exposure and a pan-Indian sensibility. I had friends from everywhere. I heard all sorts of languages from all corners of India. And the experience of growing up in India is ultimately what shaped the fundamental convictions I have. Convictions of pluralism, of faith in democracy, of faith in living with, engaging with, and dreaming the same dreams as people of different religions, different colors, different backgrounds, different languages, tastes, cuisines. That has shaped who I am, and in a sense it melded right into moving to the UN, where we're basically doing the same thing as that. So I see myself as an Indian. I see no contradiction between that sense of Indianness and being a citizen of the world, if you like, at the same time. I've held on to my Indian passport, never had any other, despite being born abroad. And as far as I'm concerned, it's great to belong to a country which is so used to dealing with people who are not like us on a daily basis, that when I work at the UN, I can deal with people who are not like me all the time and feel completely at home doing so.
Just a quick thought then. Do you feel that, and I can see that the relationship similarities, at least between journalism and diplomatic life, do you feel that that very traveling lifestyle is harmful to relationships, to families?
I think that's probably true objectively, in that the ideal family environment has to be one in which both parents are always around, where the family sits down to the same meal at a predictable time every day. And I'm sure you have never been able to enjoy that. I certainly have never been able to enjoy that. So I think we are, in some ways, shortchanging that aspect of family life. But I'd like to think that's not the only aspect of family life. I think there are things you can do together, and certainly I hope that both of us have been able to manage vacations. And that's always one time when you really have no other priority but being with your family. And apart from vacations, that in the course of the daily life, you build in to your life sometimes a sense of what's really important, that you can't avoid sometimes missing an important meeting to go and see your child in a school play or a ball game. I mean, that aspect has always also featured in my own sense of what's important.
Shashi, don't move. We're going to take a short break. We're back with One on One in just a moment.